this film, we'd like to think about how we research spaces that have been lost. The challenges of envisaging spaces that have been lost or thoroughly transformed are familiar to scholars working with all sorts of material. We're filming today in Coventry, a city that dates back to Roman times. It's a great place to learn the lessons of how very often we have to deal with spaces that have been transformed over time. We want to explore what different types of documents can tell us about these lost spaces.
In the early 15th century, Popes Martin V and Eugenius IV were forced for a time to live in Florence. A key aspect of these residencies were the papal apartments constructed to lodge the popes and their households. Unfortunately, over the centuries, almost continuous renovation has meant that virtually no physical traces of the space remain. Fortunately, thousands of written records have survived where the physical space did not. Beyond the usual chronicle and historical narratives, we have a great many administrative sources that describe in minute detail the construction and maintenance of the apartment space. These sources help us to understand the role the apartments played in the complex urban fabric of Renaissance Florence. We know, for example, that the papal apartments contained a Sala Grande, or Great Hall, a room larger than the Sistine Chapel. Like the space I'm in today, St Mary's Guildhall, the Sala Grande was designed to impress, and by bringing together these sources, we discover that this is where the popes received guests, met their cardinals, listened to sermons, and even celebrated certain liturgies.
But what about the perception of space? By looking at the emergence of the town atlas genre in early modern Europe, we are able to contextualize works like a series of atlases of Italy that was published in 17th century Amsterdam. Through their contents, including texts, images and maps, town atlases represented urban space. This made them an ideal companion to both armchair travelers and grand tourists exploring Europe during the 16th and 17th centuries. The experience of space was not dependent on actually being in it. Town atlases were intended as an aide-memoire or memory guide, a means by which Rome's monuments, for instance, could be visited mentally and studied in all their historical and architectonical detail. This process would have allowed both physical and mental travelers to familiarize themselves with the city, ideally leading to more attentive on-site observations. Upon returning home, the works helped retain memories, complementing the stories and experiences that were passed on from travelers. Leafing through these atlases today, we are likewise able to travel through space and even time. Their contents reveal contemporary social perspectives of places and regions which would otherwise be difficult or even impossible to trace.
Accounts of saints' relics can explore relationships between people, places and objects. For medieval worshippers, pilgrimage to a saint's relics was an important way to gain access to that saint's intercessory powers. At major pilgrimage centres, the entire fabric of the church building, from architecture to decoration, was enlisted to communicate to the viewer a narrative of that saint's sanctity and power. Narratives of pilgrimage to relics and tombs emphasise the importance of journeying to the sacred spaces they describe. Yet these texts also offer their readers more mobile possibilities for divine contact. In particular, the medieval book, through bejewelled bindings, architectural illustrations, golden illuminations, as well as the words of the text themselves, can invoke the experience of sacred space without the need for physical travel.
What emerges most strongly from our collective research is that all sorts of documents, from the administrative to the imaginative, allow us to access the experiences of space, even if the places themselves are lost or inaccessible. And by immersing ourselves in spaces like those you've seen in this film, we benefit from the imaginative connections that such locations inspire.